It's the Neighborhood Connect Show. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Joyce and Paul are gonna to go.
Kadzukian.
Here we go. It's the Neighborhood Connect Show.
This is Neighborhood Connect on the Kadzukian Network. My name is Paul Young. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development. I'm here with my co-host.
This is Joyce Cox.
So we're excited to be here today. Yes. We've had a great day thus far. We have two exciting guests. We have Felicia Harris, who's with us from Housing and Community Development. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you.
Felicia's the manager of Heritage Trail, so we're excited to have you here today to talk about some of the exciting things happening with that project. We also have a renowned author, Mr. Preston Lauterbach.
Thank you. I never get tired of the word renowned attached to my name. That works.
You are certainly renowned around these parts, and so we're excited about all the work that you've done to promote Memphis history. You've educated a lot of us on some of the things that have happened in this community, and so we're glad to have you on the show today.
Well, it's a healthy addiction, I think. You know, you never get sick studying history.
Right.
You always learn something. You always get enlightened, inspired, and then, you know, there's no more inspiring and enlightening place than Memphis, Tennessee.
So, Preston, why did you choose Memphis?
You know, I think it chose me in many regards. It was quite fateful. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Southern California. But every Saturday morning, I would listen to George Klein do the Elvis Hour.
Yes, yes.
And so, you know, Elvis is not to be contained. And I was just a kid. I was a young teenager listening to that stuff. And one thing just led to another. My love for music grew from there. And by the time I moved here, I was already interested in the blues from, the 1920s and the 30s, and B.B. King and Bobby Blue Bland, all the contemporary guys. And so it was meant to be. And I tell you, my odyssey really began in a funeral home.
Oh.
It was one of the Ford funeral homes. I think it was Edmund Ford's, down on Elvis Presley Boulevard.
Right.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A musician had died who had been in the Club Paradise Orchestra. I read his obituary in the Commercial Appeal, and I thought, this guy sounds fascinating. And these guys are leaving us, and, you know, something needs to be done about that. So I kind of party crashed the funeral. If you've been to a Memphis funeral before, you know what I mean. It's kind of a party, so it worked out. I didn't have to wear my solemn clothes or my solemn face or anything. Everybody was very celebratory about the occasion, and I had a chance to meet some of the legends, such as Ben Cawley, the trumpeter of the Barkays, you know, of course, who survived the plane crash that claimed Otis Redding. And, you know, I'm a listener primarily, though I'm not going to shut up for the next few minutes. And so it was just such a treat for me to get to sit there in this funeral home, you know, of all places, and listen to all of these legends talk. And one of the people that I met on that day was a man named Emerson Abel, who was longtime band director at Manassas High School. And you talk about the many unsung heroes in a place like this. This is the man who kicked Isaac Hayes out of the school band. Right?
Yes.
Really? Yeah. And so, you know, just being in his presence was just such an experience, such a treat for me. And he kind of took me under his wing. I mean, he was naturally a mentor figure, I think, by being an educator. And he introduced me to people. He told me some stories. He never really pushed me in any kind of a direction. He just kind of, developed a friendship with me, was always there for me. And so it was that friendship and that mentorship that was the real spark for me, that really made it all happen on the ground for me.
And so so you have two books, The Chitlin Circuit and The Road to Rock and Roll, and Beale Street Dynasty, Sex, Song, and the Struggle for the Soul of Memphis. You also wrote a pretty compelling article, Memphis Burning. Had you written any books before you wrote those?
No, and I really came into my own as a writer here. Wow. You know, I wasn't a writer when I got to Memphis. I think I've always had it in me, as writers do. I said that history is a healthy addiction, but writing is not. But it's the same kind of a situation where if you're compelled to do it, you just have to. You don't really have any choice in the matter, and it's always been in me. But Memphis really spoke to me. The history, the stories spoke to me and spoke through me, and so that's what had to happen, you know, for me to be able to write a book, is to meet some of these people like Mr. Abel and many others, and to connect with, what is neighborhood history? I mean, it's
Right.
all neighborhood history. There's nothing real fancy about it. It's just, local people doing extraordinary things. That's all.
Right. So I know that you were here for not a short period of time, but you were here from 2005-ish.
Yeah, I spent 8 years here.
8 years, okay.
Yeah, all 3 of my children born here, and my wife is from here. So yeah, I'm married to Memphis.
Yes.
You are. So what would you say are some of the things that you when you studied this history, what did it make you appreciate most about this city?
The inventiveness, the creativity, the originality, the artistry. It's. I've lived in other places, and I've never been anywhere that regular folk are so warm, creative, outspoken. You can't go to the drugstore and buy a tube of toothpaste without hearing somebody's life story and telling yours, and that's
Right.
really unusual. But I think that's the type of community that fosters art and artists, because storytelling is just fundamental to it's like breathing and eating. I mean, it's just part of survival, part of living here. But that's unusual.
Right.
That's really unusual. And so I think that's the heart of it.
I want to bring Felicia in on this part of the conversation because we spent quite a bit of time today. We talked about Heritage Trail. We heard a lot from Preston on the history. How does this conversation about the history of we talked about the area around Beale Street, but how does that really complement what's happening with Heritage Trail and where we are on that today?
Great. Well, it really makes it real because, one thing we're doing in Memphis Heritage Trail is we find out about history of the neighborhood, the cultural and the historical assets. As I was telling Preston earlier, it's like we're not really we're reading about a character, but in reading Beale Street Dynasty, it actually comes to life because Beale Street, Hernando, Gayso, Main Street, these streets, and the people, and you start thinking about these are actually real people. They worked here, they worship here, they played here, they built businesses here, and so it makes it real. And so I think it's very complimentary to, this just kind of reinforces what we are learning about, what we're uncovering, and and who knows how much more there is to learn.
Right.
Well, we do know that Memphis has a wealth of history. I mean, I think, I love Memphis. I was born here, and I heard someone say that South Memphis was Memphis, but let me put a plug in. North Memphis is Memphis as well. So, Preston, tell me something. I mean, let's act as if I haven't read any of your books. What are your thoughts about Memphis, and why did you write our story?
Well, I don't think anybody could ever say, I'm going to write the history of Beale Street and just go and do it. Right. The story has to, it's got to come to you. And that's really what happened. It was my own, it's a story that I've told before, which is that, I didn't really have a specific plan in mind. It was more of just a fascination with there were two aspects of it. Just the basics of what happened, right? And then also the aspect of it being no more and it needing and requiring recognition. It's like a void. People need it. They might not even know that they need it, but they need it, and it's missing. And I also felt like there were, political reasons for Robert Church's story being diminished, for Ida B. Wells' story being diminished locally. And it's good for everybody to know these things. It's a city that's been haunted. And so to have more versions, more accounts of what this city has been all about, to me was a very healthy pursuit. And I think that people, for the most part, even though, it's not always pretty, I feel like people still appreciate the overall takeaway of, how significant these figures were, how powerful, how important they were. And then if you live here, you can look around and see that they're underrepresented.
Right. So we're going to dive into that history a little bit more. We want to take a break. Join us soon. This is Neighborhood Connect on the Kudzukian Network.
R&R on sports, artivism, best in blue, funky politics, blues in the basement, Neighborhood Connect, riffin' on jazz. On the Kudzukian Network.
iConversation.
The executive director of the NBA Players Association, Ms. Michelle Roberts.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
He is currently managing director and chairman of USA Basketball, Mr. Jerry Colangelo, with us here on R&R on Sports.
Thank you guys. Nice to be with you.
The one, the only, Detlef Shrimp.
Hey, Howard and Larry, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
Ken Griffey Jr., how are you today, sir?
I'm good. How about you guys?
Catch iConversation, part of the Kudzukian Network.
I'm Preston Lauterbach, author of the notorious Beale Street Dynasty, the Chitlin Circuit and the Road to Rock and Roll, and the renowned article Memphis Burning. You are listening to the Neighborhood Connect podcast on the Kudzukian Network.
Hi, we're back with the Neighborhood Connect podcast show. And today we are talking to Preston Lauterbach and Miss Felicia Harris and the wonderful Director of Housing and Community Development, Mr. Paul Young. Hint, hint, raise. So,
working on it.
Yeah, thank you. But we were in a conversation, and we're just going to continue. I think, Paul, you had a question that you wanted to kind of put out here?
Well, I wanted to just follow up on the Memphis Burning article. That was one that happened soon after I took this role. I think we got a phone in the background, but we're going to keep rolling.
Yes.
That happens. We all have phones.
Yes.
So Memphis Burning was an article that you wrote, and it came out shortly after I moved into the role of director. And so it was really enlightening for me. I knew some of the history, maybe 10-15% of it. But I wanted to just have you shed a little bit more light on what inspired you for that article, and some of the things that you brought out were very telling in that. So give us a little bit more on that.
Well, in terms of inspiration, when somebody contacts a writer and says, we're going to give you money to produce this, suddenly I get very inspired.
That's good inspiration.
It's beautiful. And it was part of a larger study that the Kresge Foundation funded on urban areas. There was an article on Houston in the series and an article on Baltimore in the series. And they totally picked Memphis out. Well, they decided on Memphis before getting in touch with me. So it was part of this larger project. How they got in touch with me, or why they got in touch with me, why they chose me, I'm not entirely sure. But, I'm very blessed and fortunate that they did. But, it was right up my alley. It was no problem to get rolling with it. And it allowed me to take a different kind of a perspective, because look, when I'm writing a book, I know that I'm competing with Game of Thrones, and I've got to make it as thrilling as possible. I got to put all the sex, song, and struggle in it, or else somebody's gonna find something else to do, and I can't have that. But Memphis Burning, I could take a little bit more of a serious approach on things, and so I kind of enjoyed that, and looking at the way that the city and planning have reflected racial views and reinforced racial views. I mean, that was so eye-opening, and it was inspiring to me to see the reaction. When the article was put out, I had no idea. Like, I thought, oh, this thing's just whatever. I'm done with it. It's over. I got to move on with my life. It didn't let me. There was such an overwhelming reaction to it, more so than anything else I've ever published. And I think the thing that people got really fired up about, so to speak, was the idea that some of the problems that you see out in the neighborhood are the results of bad decisions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And as humans making bad decisions. And so therefore, if you make good decisions instead of bad decisions, you will get improved outcomes. Because a lot of us, look, we drive downtown, down Vance, and you see the projects, you see the poverty, you see the despair, and you just think, well, this is hopeless. But then when you understand why things are the way they are, all of a sudden you don't feel hopeless anymore.
Exactly.
There's hope in reality and truth and understanding, that there are personalities who made decisions that led to this. This is not an automatic. And so, I want to throw it back to Paul, really, because a big part of Memphis Burning is the legacy of the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority, leveled the South Memphis neighborhood. The Housing Authority built the Foot Homes and the Claiborne Homes, which was the focus in the Memphis Burning story. And now, you got to do it again. So how are you going to do it differently, and what are you going to do better? Like I said, bad decisions resulted in poor outcomes. So.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I would respond to that and just say, right now, so I'm not the director of the Housing Authority. I'm the director of the Housing and Community Development, but we work together on this redevelopment project. And I think one of the things that's significantly different from the developments that have happened even just in the past 15 years is that with this new grant, we have a strategic focus on improving the neighborhood around it. So don't just rebuild the site.
Right.
We know we can do a good job of building units on sites that we already own, because that's just a matter of finding all the money. But how do you impact the areas around it that are typically owned in the private sector? So there are a lot of different individuals that own these properties. So how do we come up with a strategy to impact that whole? And so our division is now managing that neighborhood component of it. We're trying to find how can we build other assets that are going to create a ripple effect, because we need things like grocery stores. We need early childhood education. We need jobs. The housing is just one piece of this big circle that makes things go around. And so what we're trying to do is figure out how do we plug the rest of the gaps. And, we're intent on making it work. I mean, there are so many people that are involved with this process that we think that we are going to be able to have better outcomes, not only for the families that moved away and we hope come back, but the residents, the thousands of residents that live around the development today that have to walk past blighted structures that used to be glorious mansions back in the heyday. We want to see that come back to this community. We want the private market to come and follow this public investment. And that's the thing I think I loved about your article is you framed it in a way where public policy decisions led to these outcomes. How can we make better public policy decisions? And that's what we're all intent on doing.
Well, no, you're right. I mean, there was over investment or narrow focus on just building homes.
Right.
There was never a holistic, community building perspective of people need good schools, they need good economic opportunities, and they need decent housing. It was always disjointed. It's what I saw in the history. They'd build what was the big mall that closed down there in that neighborhood?
Hickory Ridge Mall.
No, down in
Memphis.
the one right down there in the neighborhood downtown.
Oh, Peabody Place.
Peabody Place, yeah, exactly.
Which is coming back now.
Okay, it is. All right.
Yeah, we have a Fortune 500 company that's going to be moving in and renovating the mall as we speak. But I get your point.
Yeah, right. So there was never a lot of unity between the various issues that needed to be addressed. It was done kind of piecemeal. And so again, that's another way that the history can offer solutions.
Yeah,
sure.
Address all these things, and it could turn out differently.
Yeah. In the article, you talked about the leadership of the past and how they really dismantled the neighborhood, specifically right around Vance, Lauderdale, and Mississippi. I mean, do you think that was their goal, to dismantle the neighborhood as it was? Because this was a flourishing, integrated neighborhood.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They would never put it that way.
And what time frame are we talking?
This would have been the late 30s, so it was right before the construction of the Claiborne homes and the Foot homes.
Right.
Up until that point, going back to the 1880s, Memphis, South Memphis, that part of the city was a model for what life could be after the Civil War. It was integrated. You had African-American family beside white family, beside African-American family, beside white family, and you had people all, rising to prominence from that neighborhood. You had a U.S. senator living who grew up in that neighborhood. You had the Hooks family who were prominent in so many areas and facets of Memphis life, the church family, of course, but then a lot of, regular, ordinary people who got to grow up in the midst of integration, prosperity. It was just, think about it, it's reality.
Sure.
It's the way people's reality is shaped.
Right.
And so to see that for generation after generation, it had its own very positive momentum, and then you put a stop to it, and it totally changed the trajectory of life over there. And we know from studying the history of Mr. Crump, not to be confused with anybody else with a rhyming kind of name, that's the way that he wielded his authority.
Yeah.
That's the way that he led the city. But, we're not like that anymore. Let's stop behaving like that.
Well, on the Neighborhood Connect podcast show, we like to hear, we really want to focus a little bit on the youth. I know, Felicia, in the MLK 50, which is a part of the Memphis Heritage Trail, the theme is, where do we go from here?
Exactly.
So how do we tie the youth into this history? How do we help them understand without a past, you really have no future?
Well, that's true.
And understanding what that's all about.
You got to get teachers fired up about it.
Oh, okay.
One of the most touching things that I experienced, like I said, the response to Memphis Burning was just totally unexpected and overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Young lady who teaches at, was it Hamilton? Okay. I think it's at Hamilton. Mm-hmm. Assigned her junior year, sophomore high school year English class to read the Memphis Burning article.
Oh, okay.
And so they, and she said, look, to be honest with you, a lot of these kids don't care about reading. A lot of these kids have a hard time with it. A lot of these kids have, I don't know about disabilities, but challenges. And it's a pretty, in-depth, scholarly kind of article. But for them to for them to understand that it's their neighborhood and that it's their background, inspired them, and it got them excited about it. And so to me, your teachers are really your agents of reaching the youth with this stuff. And so, make the material available and interesting to them, and they'll spread the word. But this young lady who got in touch with me said there was this one particular student who she had a terrible time with, who didn't want to do any work, and she had to force him to read this article, and he just got so excited about it and was so fired up about it and just loved it. And so that just showed me the difference that just having the truth out there can make. I can't take any personal credit for that. It's just putting the truth out there.
Timing is everything.
As well as, that's kind of what happened to us with Memphis Heritage Trail. Had a history teacher that came to be a volunteer for the project. She took upon herself to design a curriculum, a Memphis Heritage Trail curriculum, and they piloted it in Kirby High School this past summer. And now we have Grizzlies Prep that called me this morning. We have MLK Leadership Academy in Frazier. Kirby High School is teaching it. Other Shelby County schools want to teach it. And so, but they're doing creative things. They're learning about the curriculum. They want to do enactments. They are doing it through art, And then a young man was in my office yesterday, 16 or 17 years old, designing his own app that deals with tourism and history. And he said, Felicia, we can do a scavenger hunt. I'm like, yeah. And I said, take it, do it, and bring it back to us. We're added to the app. So doing it in a way that is exciting to them.
That's a great point. We want to take a quick break, and we will be right back on Neighborhood Connect here on the Kudzukian Network.
R&R on sports, artivism, best in blue, funky politics, blues in the basement, Neighborhood Connect, riffin' on jazz on the Kudzukian Network.
I'll play the blues for you.
Blues in the Basement with Stephanie and T-Shawn.
Some great festivals going on around the tri-state area.
Got your dancing shoes?
Man, as long as I'm with you, baby, I'm always be on my toes.
Drop that zero.
Bring your blues, boo.
I got them.
We'll see you.
Thank you.
Blues in the Basement.
The thrill is gone.
Blues in the Basement, part of the Kudzukian Network.
The thrill is gone away.
Neighborhood Connect, always having fun.
Neighborhood Connect
with Joyce Cox and Paul Young here on Kudzukian.
I'm Paul Young. We're here back on Neighborhood Connect here with Preston Lauterbach and Felicia Harris from HCD. Preston, we're excited to have you here today. You having a good time or what?
It's always wonderful to come back to, as I said, I'm married to Memphis, so it's always wonderful to come back and be a part of it again. And it's just inspiring to me and thrilling to see everything happening. I mean, it's really a hopping time. But, I wanted to throw it back to Paul a little bit. I'm interested, in how using the city's story can be built upon in other respects. It's not necessarily just a building block for how to construct it, but other ways of community building. Community is not just about buildings, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'm really big on us being Memphis and us embracing the history of Memphis, the assets that we have. I think that so many times we go to other cities and they have big shiny buildings and big shiny things, and we say we need that. Mm-hmm. And in some instances we can build that, but we need to build that in our way.
Yeah.
And so I think that we need to try to figure out how we take history and lessons like what you've laid out for us, and I'm excited to hear about the next book, which we can talk about in a little bit, but those types of lessons and apply them in other neighborhoods to determine how do we shape our future in each of these communities. And I think that each neighborhood in Memphis has such rich history that we would be remiss if we didn't find ways to capture that and use that as the momentum to drive home future economic development. People want to come see these things.
Yeah.
You want to drive tourism. Let's be the city that embraces our history the most. We've already built a strong reputation of preserving historic buildings with what we've seen at Crosstown Concourse, the Tennessee Brewery, so many examples. We're the only city in the country that's turned a old sports arena into a retail outlet, not a mega church, but a retail outlet that's generating significant tourism and cash for the city. So, we want to take stuff like that and just go all the way with it.
And to that point, when people come to cities, they want to experience the city, what's unique about the city. And so getting down to the neighborhood level, one of the things, the state historian was with us yesterday, and one of the things he talked about, he loved the fact that it was neighborhood associations, neighborhood CDCs, they were taking upon themselves to tell their own story, to think about how they can generate revenue for their community. Like one thing that Soulsville USA was saying, we're much more than music.
Right.
We are the people, and had it not been for the musicians, you wouldn't have the neighborhood.
Right.
And so they want to, really see how they can generate revenue, but also a brand around that for their community. But these are neighborhood people. You was asking a question, how can we do it better on a neighborhood level? I think just by that, one, the partnerships with the schools, definitely the partnerships with the neighborhood associations, and letting the people get in and use their own creativity to tell their own neighborhood story. Because when visitors come, that's what they want to see. That's what they want to experience. I was reading recently that heritage tourism or cultural tourism is one of the leading parts of the industry right now, because when people come to a city, they want to get something that's authentic about that city, something they can't get anywhere else, right? So they come to Memphis, they want barbecue, they want the music, but they also want to learn about those little unknown stories about the city, and that's the neighborhood.
Well, it's like, who knows that Aretha Franklin was born on the kitchen table in a little cottage in South Memphis. I mean, it's an incredible story, and it's just been there all this time. So you've got so many assets like that, and you're exactly right. There is only one Memphis, and there is no real place than Memphis. I mean, Memphis is as real as it gets.
So Preston, I want to talk about some national things, because you actually you live in Charlottesville today.
Yeah, and I'm from Virginia. I was born in Virginia, so.
Okay, so that's your hometown. So in your hometown, obviously there were some tragic events that took place, and it all kind of revolved around history and protecting some historical monuments in that area. So you got any thoughts? We're having these discussions locally about statues and things of that nature in the city of Memphis. What do you think about that?
I'm on the Ida B. Wells warpath right now. I want to see her honored.
Yes.
Her courage and her acumen are unlike anything else out. There's only one of her, and she got her start here.
Right.
And I know there's a marker, a plaque of some sort, but if you can have a big godlike, statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest, who started the Ku Klux Klan, then you need to have something a little bit stronger in support of the woman who stood against that type of tyranny and violence and evil, because that's exactly what she did. And she didn't back down.
That's
definitely.
right.
You know?
With the Memphis Heritage Trail, we are looking at specifically that. How do we honor women? You know, when we know what we learn mostly about civil rights struggle in general is about the men. But we want to tell those lesser known stories about the women. And we're partnering with another group here in Memphis, Vote 70, which is the Tennessee Women's Suffrage Group. And one of the things that they're talking about is how do we honor women? They have an installation that's rolling out in 2018, August of 2018, and they want to highlight, I think, of 5 or 6 women. Ida B. Wells is one of them, Lois D. Berry, Minerva Jonigan, Maxine Smith, Mary Church Terrell, and I think one more I'm forgetting right now. But that's one beautiful installation that would be, but definitely we want to do, we have kind of taken it upon us and working with the Women's Foundation to come up with ways that we can honor women through some type of, whether it's some type of art piece or something, but something that's going to be lasting around the city.
And, you know, Memphis to me has the potential to be the anti-Charlottesville. There, people fought and died over a statue. Why can't we be the community that comes together around it? You know, why can't we be the community that loves each other around celebrating its legacy? We can. The potential is there.
Right. Yeah, I love it.
We don't have to make anything up, you know, it's right there.
You know, I had the opportunity to go to Birmingham and visit their heritage trails. And what amazed me was at the 16th Street Church, it was the youth that did the tours. And they talked about the history of the church and they were excited about it. And so, Felicia, you know, we had talked about what they're doing at Melrose, and you want to tell us just a little bit about it, because you know I get taken away about it. Because honestly, let me just say this, guys, Memphis to me is the bomb diggity. We have challenges, but we also have togetherness. There was a phrase, and I'm gonna let you answer my question. I heard a preacher say once, you can't join in, you got to be born in. So we welcome you.
Thank you. But you know, those challenges are what make the city great.
Exactly.
It doesn't come easy here, but that's what all of these great figures that we're talking about became great through, and that is challenge.
So we have organizations such as Blue City Cultural Center that's working specifically with 2 or 3 neighborhoods right now. So Melrose is one of those. At Melrose High School, there's a tourism hospitality program where they are training the students, and the students are learning tourism, the industry of hospitality, as well as the history of the community. And so it's multi-generational. They have the elders of the community teaching the young people about the history of the community. Those students then are going out doing tours of the community, doing enactments of the history. And likewise, we are now doing things in Whitehaven and Uptown, and Soulsville is doing that. And then we're working with Man of the House Mentoring. That is a group that mentors young boys about becoming a man and becoming of age and going through those rites of passage. But they are learning their history. They are being trained to be tour guides and tour docents. They will be some of the youth that are featured on our app when we unveil it pretty soon. And so youth are definitely involved in a number of ways, but tourism and docents is one of the 2 ways, rather.
Well, after all, you know, I love our neighborhoods. We're the Neighborhood Connect podcast. We deal with neighborhoods because neighborhoods are the very fabric of our city. And we all work, I love the word holistic, because if we all do our part, you do yours, you work it, and we're connected, then we have a whole. So here on the Neighborhood Connect podcast, that's what we're trying to put the word out and get that synergy going, because there's a lot of exciting things happening. The Memphis Heritage Trail, MLK 50. We do, and I'll put a plug in for the Taste of Memphis, which is about neighborhoods. We give our neighborhood organizations 1 table, 2 chairs, and 4 hours to celebrate their greatness. April 13th, 2018, and it'll be centered around the MLK 50 as well, because we want the people in this city to be connected. Let's talk about it. Let's as you say, talk about the statues. Let's talk about Ida B. Wells, and let's elevate that energy and that love and that compassion for one another. So
I love it.
Yeah.
So Preston, we thank you for your time today. Before we get you out of here, I wanted to hear what's the next thing you're working on?
Well, it's kind of a continuation of Beale Street Dynasty, but more tightly focused through one leading man, a very intriguing character by the name of Ernest Withers, who's a great journalist, photographer, courageous journalist during the 1950s and 60s, and also an informant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So it is a complex and compelling story that I think will resonate with the 50th anniversary celebration upcoming next year.
I feel like I'm waiting on the next season of Power. I can't wait. Scandal, Power, all of them.
Oh, Dynasty.
We're excited to have you here. Where can people find you if they want to hit you up? How can they order your books? Where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm in the background on social media. I let people talk about me. I don't do any talking.
I understand.
But no, I have a website, and really I would just urge anybody who's interested to go to Amazon or to their local bookseller. The Novel bookstore is newly opened. It's a neighborhood bookstore, Burke's Books. Great neighborhood bookstore. So support your local neighborhood bookstores and your local neighborhood history with a copy of Beale Street Dynasty or the Chitlin Circuit.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you. I have enjoyed this. Let's do it again next week.
Sounds good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for Neighborhood Connect here on the Kudzukian Network, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
This is Neighborhood Connect, executive produced by the Division of Housing and Community Development, hosted by Paul Young and Joyce Cox for HCD, engineered, recorded, and produced by Kudzukian.